like to start off with a little bit of your bio. Tell me about your history as an attorney and your situation currently.
Well, I was born and raised in Herkimer, Niagara County. 25 years, my grandmother was the first social worker in New York, upstate New York. And when I was 8 years old or 9 years old, she used to tell me stories about riding through the foothills of the Adirondacks, rescuing children. And I told her I wanted to be just like her. So she said, well, if you really want to help children, go to law school. And that's when I first decided I wanted to go to law school. So I went through University of Rochester. I went to the University of Toledo. I was on law review, and my lead article, or my article that I wrote, was actually the difficulties in prosecuting sexual offenses committed against children. And that was in 1982. Needless to say, you're still a little young, Jim, but needless to say, that was something that was not spoken of. In fact, that was very upsetting to me. I had already made the decision that I wanted to be a prosecutor. So I subsequently received a judicial clerkship in New Jersey, went down, did my one-year clerkship in New Jersey, passed the bar exam, and I took a job in the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office in Freehold, New Jersey. And the reason was that the prosecutor, the head prosecutor at the time, had made sex crimes, child abuse a priority. In fact, he was in the process of establishing the first sex crimes, child abuse unit. And that's exactly what I wanted to do, and that's what I began to do. I worked my way through, tried any number of violent offenses, armed robberies, aggravated assault, you name it. I went on to become the director of the sex crimes, child abuse unit, where what we did was vertical prosecution. We actually we had 7 investigators, we had victim advocates. What we did was we took the cases from the very beginning with the children. And we worked our way up. I handled the case immediately from the beginning of the complaint and worked it all the way through the grand jury, ultimately to trial if that needed to go to trial. What I learned from that was the importance of a prosecutor as a victim advocate for 2 reasons. Number one, I think it's our responsibility. As a prosecutor, you have the ability to be able to, you're the protector as victims, especially young victims look at it. You're the person that if you tell them that it's not their fault, if you tell them that they shouldn't be ashamed, if you tell them that they're a hero, they believe it. So to me, part of my job, in addition to successfully prosecuting a case, was to successfully turning a victim from a survivor into a thriver. There's another aspect of it, is I was very successful in my prosecutions. Yes, I have the trial skills, but quite frankly, the witnesses were ready to testify, and they did so successfully. And it takes a while, it takes a lot of effort to get them to that point, as you can imagine. But that's what I found was very important, and that's what I would bring to the office as the Broome County District Attorney, is to expand. Our children at risk need to be identified. I went on, I had 3 children. I continued working part-time as a municipal prosecutor, predominantly handling domestic violence cases, raising my 3 children, Girl Scouts, softball, basketball, you name it. But at the same time, I also wanted to be involved in the community, and I saw a new program called Epiphany House. Epiphany House was first program where what we did was we actually took drug-addicted women with their children. Now, these were women that we took out of the jail. We took these women off the street, out from under boardwalks. All of them had lost custody. They were in the foster system. We brought them into a program whereby we offered a 5 to 9 month residential treatment program in a home-like setting. In addition, they received treatment, they received parenting, they received job skills, education. They took care of each other. We also had a children's home to take care of even babies and pregnant women. Once we started to get them back on their feet, what I learned was that the greatest incentive, aside from the fact that they have their back with their children and to be able to stay with their children, is the fact that we were able to purchase condemned buildings in Asbury Park. And we were able to obtain funds and donations, and we renovated those. Our first apartment building, we had 10 apartments. So what we did was we offered our graduates an opportunity to have brand new, safe, clean, independent housing at Section 8. and we move our graduates in there, and the condition was they had to stay sober. In addition, they also continued to receive support from us, and they in turn supported the other women that were coming into the home. The beauty of that was not only did we restore a condemned building, and there were many in Asbury Park, is that we also pay taxes. We went on, by the time I left, to have restored 4 buildings in Asbury Park. We had an extremely high success rate for heroin addicted women, which usually has the lowest. And the reason is that women oftentimes will turn back to heroin because, quite frankly, the withdrawal and other symptoms they have even months and years later that they're clean essentially is debilitating. So what they do is they turn back to drugs because that's the only thing that will continue to have them, allow them to take care of their children, but unfortunately, usually it's what ends up costing them their children. So I learned you need to have collaborative services, and I've continued to learn that for 35 years. I've seen that over and over, representing individuals, seeing what has caused them to come back into the system over and over and over, why they've had treatment and then gone back into the same thing. And usually it's housing. They can't get mental health issues. And in 2001, I left Epiphany House, and I was basically a volunteer there, having done so. And I did so because I became a judge, and we weren't allowed to be involved in any nonprofits at the time. As a judge, I began to learn about the aspect of domestic violence, as well as mental health and addiction. Those are things that I'd already known about, but what really came to the forefront was when I became a civil commitment judge at the Trent Psychiatric Hospitals. That's when I really learned about the impact of mental health, and this was back in the 90s. Because what I saw over and over and over again, because I would go once a week with my team, we would go to each hospital, we would meet with about 75 patients, and I would read their backgrounds, I'd read their statements, I would see how their treatment had gone. But when you look at their history, one constant was very readily apparent, is they had suffered childhood trauma. In addition, they also had addiction issues. But what was interesting and what I learned was that the importance of mental health and childhood trauma as it relates to addiction. And we've simply been doing it wrong. For too many years, we would take a treatment. We would do it. We would just put an individual into treatment. And that would work for some time. But the underlying issue why individuals would turn to drugs to be able to self-medicate turned out to be the mental health, depression, anxiety. We were just putting a Band-Aid on it. We need to do it different. We need to have a mental health court. We need to identify children at risk. We need to essentially get them help as soon as possible so they don't suffer the mental health issues down the road, whereby they're more likely to turn to addiction. That's how we combat the opioid crisis. I've seen it over and over and over again. And that's what I intend to do. Now that we have an opportunity with the criminal justice reform where nonviolent offenders, oftentimes individuals with addiction or mental health issues, are going to be released on no cash bail. The concern is, well, what's going to happen with the community? They're going to need money. They're going to need places to live. And the individuals who are addicted are going to need to have situations where they're going to be looking to get their next fix. We need to protect the community. At the same time, it's an opportunity, and I've had that experience, to bring comprehensive collaborative services and partnerships and incentives to these individuals and their families to be able to turn their lives around by addressing their mental health issues, treatment, job training, jobs, any type of services, and sober, safe housing. And in my experience, in 35 years, that's what I've seen work. So that's what I intend to bring to this office. I've been an investigative prosecutor, I've been a trial prosecutor, I've served in many different capacities. As a judge, I worked nationally and was on the National Association of Women Judges on 7 other standing committees because I truly believe in justice. And that's what I bring to the table. Integrity, independence, objectivity, and experience, not only within the criminal justice system, but also within social justice.
What have you been doing in recent years, and what brought you to Binghamton?
What brought me to Binghamton is the fact that my children all have settled. I still have family up in Herkimer County, and I had had my own practice for many years. But the circumstances were such that I had taken a hiatus to help my mother with my stepfather, who suffered and ultimately passed from Parkinson's. But when I started my practice back up, I realized it's very difficult to do for a number of reasons, especially in New Jersey. Extremely expensive. And also, it was a point in time where I really liked the idea of being able to work in a corporate law firm. And the reason for that is obviously benefits. Had wonderful health benefits. And Tully Rinke contacted me, and they started to recruit me. And it was just at the time that New Jersey and New York started to have waiving and to be able to have reciprocity. So that was, I believe, 3 years ago. So I immediately applied to be admitted into New York. You have to go through a very intensive background, etc. It takes quite a while, but basically I was approved, and as soon as I was approved, I was sworn in, and Tully Rinke hired me. Tully Rinke is a wonderful firm. It's a large firm, originated in Albany. It's from veterans, but they have offices. I had opportunities in Albany, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, New York City. Just in the New York area, we have others in other states. But Binghamton was the best fit for me for a number of reasons. I grew up on a farm. I grew up in small towns. Binghamton is, I have children in Pennsylvania. I have family up in Little Falls. It's a perfect fit. I feel at home here. I love this county. It's what I've chosen to be my home and where I intend to stay.
Great. All right, so what do you think are the most important issues in this campaign?
In honesty, integrity. I think you really need to look at the candidates. You need to look at the experience. Because the issues are so complicated. The importance of this position is so important. You need to have experience, and you need to have an individual who exemplifies integrity. I've been doing this for 35 years. This is what I've always wanted to do. This is what I've always done, and I've done it from every vantage point. And I've been blessed with that, and I'm grateful for that experience. Mr. Battisti calls me a carpetbagger. That's the farthest thing from the truth. I was born and raised in upstate New York. That's where my values are. That's who I relate to. And I love Broome County. But in my wildest dreams, I never thought I'd be running for district attorney when I moved here a couple of years ago.
Well then, why do you want to be district attorney?
There's a lot of reasons. One of which was as I felt that there was a circumstance where, because of the criminal justice reform, I believe that I had the experience to be able to, and had a plan to be able to help our community not only make it safer, but also because of the opioid crisis. It was kind of a number of circumstances. I can remember that the first time someone even approached me about it, I thought it was kind of funny. But then I realized, when looking at it and thinking about it, with the criminal justice reforms and with my experience, that it can be done. It's an opportunity to be able to take our nonviolent offenders and get them help and get them treatment. And in fact, it's a supply and demand. The way to attack the opioid crisis is not only to investigate and stop those individuals who are just bringing the drugs from outside of Broome County into Broome County, in addition to dry up the demand and give people their lives back. But it's incredibly important we have an individual that's also independent. When I look at this community, I realize that it lacks public confidence in some of its law enforcement and its criminal justice system. That needs to be restored. And I believe I can bring that to the table. My professional and my ethics are of the utmost importance to me. It always has been, it always will be.
Aside from your experience, what sort of personal skills do you think you possess that would make you good at being the district attorney?
I believe I'm a very good communicator. I listen. My grandmother told me once is you can learn something from everyone you meet. I'm also an individual who's someone who can sit down at the table, listen to what others have to say, and come up with a solution. And that's what we need. We need to work together. It has to be a system where it's just transparent. It also has to be, it just can't be me. It has to be a community leaders need to step up. And that's what I've seen lacking, is we need to have the community leaders start to work with other community leaders to build the public confidence in the system. Otherwise, it's just going to deteriorate even further.
So I'd like to finish these interviews with a fairly open-ended question, and that's basically, why should people vote for you?
People should vote for me because I understand the criminal justice system. I know how to improve it. I know how to make Broome County safer. And make no mistake, I talk about social justice issues, but when it comes to the protection of children, when it comes to violent offenders, I will bring the full arm of the district attorney's office to bear and have successful prosecutions. Those are where we need to point our resources as well. So we have our violent offenders, which I believe we can help. We have our non-violent offenders, which we believe we can help, and our violent offenders, which we need to take off the streets. And that's fully what I intend to do.
All right, is there anything else that you'd like to add that I didn't think to ask?
No, just the job of the district attorney is hard to understand. But make no mistake, it is a job that requires an individual with integrity, with experience, and with professionalism. The present state of affairs, unfortunately, with negativity in this campaign is unfortunate. I've held a positive campaign. I've talked about my qualifications. I've talked about my experience. I've talked about my plan. I would ask the voters to look closely at what really has been said about an individual's qualifications or experience. This is not on-the-job training. This is something that is going to have a huge impact on our community, a huge impact on our future, a huge impact on our children. And that's what it's all about.